Avoidant behavior in a relationship can be incredibly confusing, especially when you're someone who shows up with openness and emotional honesty. You might start questioning everything about yourself. Was I too much? Did I come on too strong? Was I asking for something unreasonable? But the truth is, when someone exhibits avoidant tendencies, it's rarely ever about you. It's about their internal wiring, specifically their fear of vulnerability and closeness. Avoidants have typically learned, either through early relationships or life experiences, that emotional intimacy feels unsafe. Somewhere along the line, they equated closeness with pain, obligation, or even loss of control. So when they start to feel genuinely close to someone, their instincts tell them to pull away. That protective armor goes up, not because you did something wrong, but because intimacy triggers something unresolved within them. This is where a lot of people get stuck. We personalize their distance. We think, if I just say the right thing, show them I'm safe, love them harder, they'll stay. But you can't outlove someone's trauma. You can't logic your way into their emotional availability, and trying to do so will only lead you to question your worth. Here's the hard truth. When you get involved with someone who is emotionally avoidant, they are operating from fear, not malice. They're not out to hurt you intentionally. They're trying to survive emotional closeness the only way they know how, by controlling it, limiting it, or running from it. It can feel so personal because they might open up just enough to give you hope. You see moments of softness, connection, and even vulnerability. But just when you think you're getting somewhere, they pull back again. And the cycle repeats, hot and cold, close, then distant. And in that cycle, you lose your sense of stability. The emotional whiplash isn't about your inadequacy, it's about their discomfort with intimacy. But the more you try to fix it, the more you entangle yourself in a dynamic that keeps you emotionally depleted. Recognizing that their behavior isn't about you is the first step to freedom. Because when you stop internalizing their avoidance, you stop trying to earn love that should already be mutual. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into their comfort zone. And here's what's even more powerful. When you stop chasing their approval, you create space to reconnect with your own needs and boundaries. You start to realize that love shouldn't feel like chasing someone who's always 1 foot out the door. It should feel like coming home. Home. So if you're in that place right now, confused, hurt, and wondering why someone keeps you at arm's length, remember this: their distance is not a reflection of your worth, it's a reflection of their wounds. And while you can have compassion for their struggle, you don't have to make yourself small to accommodate it. When you're emotionally available to someone with avoidant tendencies, you unintentionally create an unbalanced emotional economy. You give freely your time, your vulnerability, your presence, while they remain guarded, measured, or distant. Over time, that imbalance becomes not just a pattern, but a weight you carry alone. What starts as compassion or patience turns into emotional labor, and the relationship becomes a place where one person is reaching while the other is retreating. This dynamic can feel subtle at first. Maybe they don't text as often, or they avoid deep conversations. They might change the subject when things get too emotional, disappear for days when intimacy begins to deepen. You justify it. They're just busy. They're not good with emotions. They need space. But what you're really doing is compensating. You're doing the emotional heavy lifting, trying to make the relationship feel secure, stable, and meaningful for both of you, without realizing they're not meeting you halfway. And the more emotionally present you are, the more uncomfortable it often makes the avoidant partner. Your honesty makes them feel exposed. Your affection feels like pressure. Your reliability makes them worry they'll have to show up at that same level, and they're not sure they can. What ends up happening is that your openness becomes the glue holding the connection together. But glue only works if both pieces are willing to stay in place. When it's just one person showing up, communicating, initiating, repairing, it creates a lopsided bond. And that kind of bond is unsustainable. Not because you're not doing enough, but because you're doing too much in a space that requires mutual effort. Emotionally available people tend to be nurturers. You want to fix, help, and understand. You may tell yourself, if I just keep showing them how safe I am, they'll eventually feel comfortable opening up. But relationships don't thrive on one person proving their love while the other keeps the door half shut. At some point, emotional generosity without reciprocity becomes self-abandonment. The truth is, when you're available to someone avoidant, you're often giving them the luxury of staying emotionally stagnant. They don't have to confront their fears or challenge their patterns because you're doing the emotional work for both of you. And in doing so, you're deprioritizing your own needs for connection, intimacy, and growth. Understanding this doesn't mean you have to be cold or cut them off impulsively. But it does mean you have to take stock. Are you building a relationship with someone, or are you maintaining a one-sided connection? Emotional availability should be met, not managed. And when you realize that, you stop trying to carry what was never yours to carry in the first place. When you chase someone who is emotionally avoidant, you're not just moving toward them, you're reinforcing their behavior. Every time you reach out after they pull away, every time you try to close the gap when they create distance, you teach them that it's okay to retreat because you'll always be the one to repair the connection. You become the emotional anchor for both of you while they drift further away, knowing consciously or not that you'll keep holding on. Avoidant individuals often struggle with emotional intimacy, and their instinct is to protect themselves by withdrawing. When you chase, you validate their fear. That closeness leads to pressure, loss of independence, or even emotional suffocation. You're trying to prove your love and commitment, but to them, it feels like intensity. It triggers their anxiety, not their appreciation. This creates a painful paradox. The more you try to show up, the more they feel the need to escape. You interpret their withdrawal as a signal to try harder. They interpret your effort as pressure to pull back. And so the cycle begins, they retreat, you pursue, and both of you become locked in roles that prevent real connection. The tragedy here is that your effort comes from a good place. You care. You want things to work. You see potential. But by chasing, you unintentionally teach them that they never have to face the discomfort of closeness. They never have to lean in, because you're always closing the distance for them. Now, over time, this dynamic is exhausting. It erodes your self-esteem. You start to feel like you're hard to love, like if you could just be a little more chill, a little less emotional, a little more easygoing, they'd finally stay. But that thinking is a trap. You're not too much. They're just not ready to meet you where you are. When you stop chasing, things start to shift. Not necessarily because they'll suddenly change, but because you begin to break the emotional dependency that's been keeping you stuck. You stop trying to earn the love that should be mutual. You start asking, what about my needs? Instead of how can I keep them close? Avoidant behavior doesn't magically disappear when you stop chasing. But what does change is the power dynamic. You begin to show with your actions that emotional connection isn't something they get to opt into only when it's convenient. That your presence is not a guarantee, it's a gift. And if someone keeps stepping back every time you step forward, maybe the healthiest move isn't to chase. Maybe it's to pause, turn inward, and ask yourself why you keep trying to convince someone who isn't ready to be convinced. You can't build a secure relationship by dragging someone toward it. But you can build a secure self by recognizing when to stop running after love that constantly runs from you. When you continue to be emotionally available to someone who is avoidant, your presence often becomes their comfort zone, not their reason to grow. What this means is that your patience, empathy, and willingness to start acting like a cushion that protects them from ever having to confront the discomfort of their own emotional limitations. In other words, they get the benefit of your connection without having to do the hard inner work that a real relationship requires. Avoidant individuals typically fear vulnerability. Getting close makes them feel exposed, overwhelmed, or even trapped. But when you remain present, offering love, reassurance, and emotional support, they can enjoy the benefits of your emotional availability without being emotionally available themselves. They get the warmth without having to build the fire. They get connection without accountability. You, in a way, become their safe harbor, but it's a harbor they sail in and out of as they please, while you stay anchored, waiting. And here's where it gets even more complicated. They may not even realize they're doing this. It's not always manipulative, it's often subconscious. They're drawn to the comfort you provide, the way you make them feel seen and accepted. But as soon as the emotional stakes rise, their reflex is to pull back. And they can do that easily, because you've made yourself consistently available. There's no urgency for them to change. No consequences for withdrawing. No need to reflect because you're still there, filling in the emotional gaps. This dynamic doesn't challenge them, it enables them. And over time, it leaves you carrying not just the relationship's emotional weight, but the responsibility for both people's growth. And that's not fair! You can't be someone's emotional safety net, while also waiting for them to mature into a partner who shows up fully. That's not partnership, that's imbalance. What needs to happen is a disruption of the pattern. Growth doesn't occur in comfort zones. People grow when they're faced with the discomfort of change, when they lose the luxury of someone else managing the emotional temperature of the relationship for them. When you stop being available, when you pull back, not out of malice, but out of self-respect, they're forced to face the emotional void that your effort used to fill. And in that space, one of two things happens. Either they confront themselves and choose to grow, or they remain avoidant and let the relationship go. Either way, you win, because you're no longer stuck in a role that robs you of your emotional well-being. You're no longer shaping yourself around someone else's fear of intimacy. You stop being the crutch they lean on to avoid learning how to walk emotionally on their own. Ultimately, being there for someone shouldn't mean allowing them to stay emotionally stunted. And love, real love, should never require you to sacrifice your needs in order to protect someone from facing theirs. Withdrawing your emotional availability from someone who is avoidant is often misunderstood as a form of punishment or rejection. But in reality, it's an act of self-respect, a boundary that protects your heart and honors your needs. It's not about trying to hurt them or make them pay for their behavior. It's about valuing yourself enough to stop sacrificing your emotional well-being for someone who isn't fully present. When you're constantly available to an avoidant partner, you may feel like you're the only one investing in the relationship. You're offering your time, your vulnerability, your reassurance, all while they remain distant or emotionally shut down. This one-sidedness wears you down, and at some point, your capacity to give without getting much in return begins to diminish. That's when withdrawing isn't just healthy, it's necessary. Stepping back creates space, not only for you to heal and regain your strength, but also for the avoidant person to feel the natural consequences of their emotional distance. It's a way of showing them that your love and presence aren't guaranteed. They are something earned and cherished. This change in availability shifts the dynamic and often encourages reflection. When they notice that you're no longer as accessible, it forces a question. Do I want to engage or continue to retreat? It's important to understand that setting this boundary doesn't mean you're cold or unkind. On the contrary, it's a courageous act of clarity. It means you're refusing to enable emotional avoidance by silently accepting less than you deserve. You're saying, I see you, but I see myself too. It's about honoring the fact that your feelings matter and that your emotional needs are valid. Many people fear withdrawal will cause the avoidant partner to leave for good. And while that might happen, and honestly, it's often the healthiest outcome, it's also possible that this boundary can open the door to genuine change. Sometimes the absence of your constant availability is the wake-up call they need to start working on their fears, to step into vulnerability, and to meet you halfway. Of course, withdrawal must come from a place of strength, not desperation or manipulation. It's not a tactic to win or punish. It's an honest recognition that the relationship cannot thrive unless there is mutual emotional investment. It's a loving act towards yourself as much as it is a potential catalyst for growth. So if you find yourself exhausted from always being the one who's there while they pull away, know that stepping back is not betrayal. It's boundary setting. It's reclaiming your power and inviting healthier patterns into your life. And sometimes that means becoming unavailable, not to hurt, but to heal. When you stop being emotionally available to an avoidant person, you break a cycle that often feels impossible to escape. This cycle is one of emotional dependency, where you find yourself constantly giving, reaching, and hoping, while they continue to withdraw, avoid, or keep their distance. It's exhausting, confusing, and can leave you questioning your worth. But the moment you choose to no longer be available in that way, you disrupt the dynamic, and that disruption is powerful. Emotional dependency in these relationships often looks like you being the one who consistently initiates contact, tries to resolve conflicts, or extends emotional support. Woo. Meanwhile, the avoidant person remains guarded, sometimes appearing indifferent or disconnected. You become the emotional caretaker, the fixer, the one who keeps the relationship alive. But this unequal balance isn't sustainable, and it doesn't lead to genuine intimacy. When you pull back, you send a clear message. Your love and attention are not unlimited resources to be taken for granted. You're no longer the safety net that catches them every time they step back. This forces the avoidant person to face a reality they may have been avoiding, that their emotional unavailability has consequences. Breaking this cycle isn't about playing games or being manipulative. It's about reclaiming your emotional health and refusing to participate in a relationship dynamic that drains you. When you stop making yourself available, you shift from being reactive to proactive. You take control of your emotional boundaries instead of allowing the other person's avoidance to dictate your feelings and actions. This change also allows you to reconnect with yourself. When you're no longer caught in the cycle of chasing someone who isn't fully present, you gain clarity about what you truly want and deserve. You rediscover your self-worth outside of their approval or attention. And this newfound strength becomes the foundation for healthier relationships in the future. It's important to recognize that breaking this cycle might initially feel uncomfortable or even painful. The avoidant person may respond by pulling away further or testing your boundaries. But this is part of the process. True change often requires discomfort. Your withdrawal of availability challenges the old patterns and invites new possibilities, either for growth within the relationship or for you to move on with greater self-respect. Ultimately, choosing to no longer be emotionally available to an avoidant person isn't about shutting down your heart. It's about opening the door to healthier dynamics where both partners are willing to meet each other with vulnerability and presence. It's about breaking free from the exhausting loop of emotional dependency and stepping into a space where mutual respect and genuine connection can flourish. When you create distance by no longer being emotionally available to an avoidant person, it introduces a powerful space that often becomes a catalyst for clarity. Distance isn't just physical. It's emotional and mental as well. This separation allows both you and the avoidant partner to pause, reflect, and reassess the dynamics that have been playing out in your relationship. For the avoidant individual, this distance can be unsettling because it interrupts their usual pattern of withdrawal and emotional avoidance. Without your constant availability to lean on or to chase after, they are faced with an emotional vacuum, one that invites them to consider their own fears and patterns. This clarity often brings discomfort, but it also creates an opportunity for growth. It's in the quiet moments of absence that they may start to ask themselves difficult questions about what they want, what they fear, and what they're willing to risk for connection. For you, this distance offers the chance to gain perspective on the relationship. It's easy to lose yourself in the cycle of chasing and withdrawing, hoping to fix what feels broken. But when you step back, you can see the relationship more objectively. You begin to recognize patterns, boundaries that have been crossed, and emotional needs that have been unmet. This clarity empowers you to make decisions based on self-respect rather than desperation or hope. Distance also provides a testing ground for both partners to understand the value of the relationship. It reveals whether the connection is something worth fighting for, or if it's been sustained mainly by one person's effort. Sometimes the absence of your emotional availability shows the avoidant person what they stand to lose. Other times it reveals that the relationship may never reach the level of intimacy you desire, no matter how much you hope or try. This space created by distance is essential because true intimacy cannot be rushed or forced. It requires willingness and readiness from both people. When one person is avoidant and the other is consistently available, intimacy becomes a one-sided effort. But when availability is withdrawn, it invites a reset, a chance to recalibrate what's possible. Moreover, this distance teaches you the importance of boundaries. It reinforces that your emotional well-being matters and that you deserve relationships where connection is mutual. You learn that stepping away isn't abandonment. It's a healthy act of self-care. In the end, the clarity that distance brings is a gift, even if it's uncomfortable at first. It helps both parties see the reality of their connection and decide what's next with greater honesty. And for you, it's a step toward reclaiming your emotional power and living a life where you're valued, not for how available you are, but for who you truly are. When you start honoring your own emotional needs and boundaries, especially in a relationship with an avoidant partner, everything begins to shift. For too long, you might have been suppressing your feelings, minimizing your needs, or bending over backwards to accommodate their distance. But recognizing that your emotional well-being matters is the foundation for true empowerment and healthier connections. Honoring your emotional needs means acknowledging what you require to feel safe, loved, and respected. It means identifying the behaviors and patterns that no longer serve you and deciding that you won't settle for less than what you deserve. This could be wanting consistent communication, openness, or simply feeling prioritized. Whatever your needs are, they're valid, and honoring them isn't selfish, it's necessary. When you set clear boundaries around your emotional availability, you stop allowing the relationship to be one-sided. Boundaries aren't walls meant to keep someone out. They're guidelines that define how you want to be treated and how you intend to treat yourself. By communicating your limits clearly, whether that's around time, attention, or emotional engagement, you create a framework that fosters respect and mutual understanding. For an avoidant partner, your boundaries might initially feel unfamiliar or even threatening. They might react by pulling back further or testing how firm you are. But boundaries are not about controlling the other person, they're about protecting your own heart. When you maintain your boundaries consistently, you teach them what healthy connection looks like, and you model self-respect in action. This honoring of your needs also leads to greater self-awareness. You become more attuned to your feelings, more confident in your worth, and less willing to tolerate emotional neglect or inconsistency. This shift empowers you to make decisions from a place of strength, not fear or desperation. You begin to choose relationships that nourish you instead of depleting you. Importantly, honoring yourself doesn't guarantee that the avoidant partner will change, but it does guarantee that you will stop losing yourself in the process. It helps you break free from the exhausting cycle of chasing approval and instead focus on cultivating a connection where your needs are met and your feelings are honored. In the long run, this approach invites healthier relationships, not just with others, but with yourself. You start to understand that love isn't about sacrifice or compromise at the cost of your happiness. True love respects boundaries, encourages growth, and values emotional availability from both partners. So when you choose to honor your own emotional needs and boundaries, you're not only transforming your relationship, you're transforming your life. You create space for authentic connection and show up as your fullest, most empowered self. That is where real change begins. When you fully embrace your worth and stop compromising your needs for someone who is avoidant, you reclaim your power in a profound way. Too often in relationships with avoidant partners, people find themselves shrinking, dimming their light, or pretending to be someone they're not just to keep the other person close. But true empowerment comes from recognizing that your value isn't conditional on someone else's ability or willingness to meet you halfway. Accepting your worth means understanding that you deserve love that is consistent, respectful, and emotionally available. It means refusing to settle for breadcrumbs or moments of connection that come only when it's convenient for the other person. When you accept your worth, you're setting a standard, not just for your partner, but for yourself. You're telling yourself that your feelings, your time, and your energy matter just as much as anyone else's. This acceptance is liberating because it frees you from the exhausting cycle of trying to fix or change someone else's emotional availability. When you stop compromising your needs, you stop bending yourself into shapes that don't fit you, and you stop ignoring the red flags that indicate a lack of mutual respect. You begin to see that it's not your job to fill their emotional gaps or make their fears disappear. Enter. Embracing your worth also transforms how you show up in relationships. Instead of chasing after someone who isn't fully present, you become someone who attracts relationships based on mutual respect and genuine connection. You learn to say no to what doesn't serve you and yes to what nourishes your soul. This shift might feel scary at first because it means facing the possibility of loss or loneliness, but it's a necessary step toward authentic happiness. When you accept your worth, you also develop resilience. You become less reactive to someone else's avoidance or distance because you know that your value isn't diminished by their inability to love fully. This resilience helps you maintain your boundaries without guilt or second guessing. You're no longer dependent on external validation to feel whole. Importantly, accepting your worth doesn't mean you stop loving or caring. It means you love yourself enough to demand reciprocity. It means you understand that healthy love is a two-way street where both partners show up with vulnerability, effort, and respect. In essence, when you embrace your worth and stop compromising, you stop being a participant in a one-sided dance and become the leader of your own emotional life. You create space for love that lifts you up instead of draining you. And you send a clear message, not just to your avoidant partner, but to the world that you are worthy of love that is as real and whole as you are. When you finally stop being available to an avoidant person, you empower yourself to start building genuine, healthy connections that honor your true needs and desires. It's easy to get trapped in a cycle where emotional availability is given freely to someone who can't or won't meet you halfway. This often leads to frustration, confusion, and a sense of emptiness because the relationship becomes about managing their distance rather than nurturing mutual closeness. But the moment you step back and prioritize your own availability for yourself and for those who truly value you, you open the door to something far more fulfilling. Healthy relationships are founded on reciprocity. When both people show up fully, there is a natural rhythm of giving and receiving, sharing vulnerability and offering support. This balance creates safety and trust, which are essential for deeper intimacy. In contrast, relationships with avoidant individuals often feel one-sided, where your availability becomes a bridge you're constantly building alone. Once you stop being the constant bridge and hold firm boundaries around your emotional availability, you allow space for relationships where connection is mutual. This shift doesn't just affect how others treat you, it changes how you treat yourself. You begin to recognize your emotional needs as valid and worthy of respect. You stop settling for less and instead seek out partnerships that align with your values and desires. By doing this, you nurture your self-esteem and reinforce your worth, which attracts healthier dynamics. Additionally, when you stop being endlessly available to someone who avoids emotional closeness, you reclaim your energy and focus. Instead of expending effort trying to pull someone closer, you invest that time and emotion into yourself and into people who are ready and willing to engage authentically. This creates a positive feedback loop. As you honor your own boundaries and needs, you become more grounded, confident, and attractive to others who respect those qualities. Importantly, stepping back also allows you to evaluate what you truly want from relationships. Without the distraction of chasing emotional availability from someone who is avoidant, you can clarify your vision for connection, intimacy, and partnership. This clarity guides your choices, helping you build relationships that feel fulfilling and balanced rather than draining or uncertain. In essence, stopping your emotional availability to someone avoidant isn't about punishment or rejection. It's about self-preservation and growth. It's about creating space for connections that bring joy, respect, and mutual care. By prioritizing your own emotional health and boundaries, you pave the way for relationships that honor the full spectrum of who you are and what you deserve. Learning to be emotionally unavailable to an avoidant partner isn't about becoming cold or indifferent. It's about cultivating emotional independence and resilience. When you constantly make yourself available to someone who is avoidant, you may find yourself caught in a cycle of emotional highs and lows, always reacting to their distance, unpredictability, or withdrawal. This pattern can drain your energy and sense of self over time. Developing emotional independence means stepping out of that cycle and finding stability within yourself. Emotional independence is about knowing that your happiness and sense of worth don't depend on another person's availability or affection. It means you can maintain your emotional equilibrium regardless of whether the avoidant partner is present, distant, or pulling away. This doesn't mean shutting down your feelings or avoiding connection. Rather, it means grounding your emotional health in your own self-awareness and self-care practices. When you build this kind of resilience, you create a protective buffer against the emotional turbulence that often accompanies relationships with avoidant individuals. Instead of reacting impulsively to their withdrawal or sending endless messages to regain their attention, You learn to pause, reflect, and respond with calm and clarity. This shift reduces anxiety and helps you make decisions based on what's truly best for you, not just on the hope that the avoidant partner will change. Emotional independence also empowers you to set and maintain healthy boundaries without guilt or fear. You're less likely to tolerate inconsistent behavior or compromise your needs just to keep the peace. Instead, you prioritize your well-being, knowing that healthy relationships require mutual effort and respect. Moreover, this independence can transform the dynamic with your avoidant partner. When you're less available emotionally, you stop reinforcing their avoidance pattern. Your calm, centered presence becomes an invitation for them to step up or step away, rather than a safety net they can always fall back on. Sometimes this can encourage growth in the avoidant person, but regardless, it protects you from being stuck in an exhausting cycle. Building emotional independence takes time and practice. It involves developing self-compassion, engaging in activities that nourish your spirit, and seeking support from friends, mentors, or therapists who can help you stay grounded. It means learning to enjoy your own company and finding fulfillment outside the relationship. Ultimately, becoming emotionally unavailable to an avoidant partner is about reclaiming your emotional power. It's about choosing yourself first and creating a life where your happiness doesn't hinge on someone else's ability to be present. This emotional resilience sets the stage for healthier relationships, whether with this person or someone new, and ensures that you show up in the world as your strongest, most authentic self. In the journey of loving someone with avoidant tendencies, everything changes the moment you decide to no longer be endlessly available to them. This shift is not about punishment or playing games. It's about reclaiming your emotional power, honoring your needs, and breaking free from exhausting patterns that keep you stuck. When you set clear boundaries, withdraw availability with self-respect, and cultivate emotional independence, you create space for true clarity, both for yourself and for the avoidant partner. This space forces reflection, invites growth, and reveals whether the relationship can transform into a healthy reciprocal connection, or if it's time to walk away with dignity. By prioritizing your own worth and refusing to settle for less than mutual respect and emotional presence, you step into a new reality, one where your love is met with openness, your vulnerability is met with care, and your relationship is built on authentic intimacy. Ultimately, everything changes because you change. You become the architect of your own emotional well-being and the creator of the kind of connection you truly deserve. And that, above all, is the most empowering and transformative act of love you can give yourself.